Welcome back, everybody. So today we're going to go ahead and navigate through Unreal. We're going to go ahead and just get familiar with some of the navigation throughout the system, as well as moving your camera around and everything in between. So as mentioned, and I actually did forget to mention this in the last video, but another way you can actually load up your projects is if you've elected for a shortcut, you can actually double click this. And if you give it a second, it will load up the dashboard, so you don't actually have to go through the Epic launcher after it's installed. So we'll give it a second. We'll let it load. And once it's done loading, we'll go ahead and open up our project. So here we are. Should look familiar for those that were there for the last tutorial. Now, if you're coming into the secondary tutorial and you're wanting to know what template we use, so we did go with third person. We haven't made any changes. That is definitely coming up, so just stand by for that. So let's go ahead and load up our project. All right, so once your project is loaded, just go ahead and double check those little error pop-ups, make sure it's up to date. And yeah, let's go ahead and talk about some of the navigation, the interface, things that you're going to get familiar with. Now, just want to clarify that we will run through a few things that we might not touch on for a bit. It's just good to know what you can actually do right here on the main hub. So first and foremost, this square with everything you're seeing there, that's referred to as your viewport. So your viewport is what you're going to actually be seeing in whatever level you're working with. So this is pretty much your primary, primary screen when you're in here building stuff. Now, for those that actually have played a lot of first-person shooters and things like that, you're going to be right at home with a lot of navigation. Now, one thing you're going to have to kind of get used to is running around the screen, or level, I should say, to get better perspective on what you might be modifying. So the way we go ahead and do that is by clicking the right mouse button. It's going to allow you to kind of look around, but you don't move, right? So the way we go ahead and move is, you guessed it, WASD, just like any first-person shooter. Cool. So you can fly around. Now, a couple cool things that you can do, especially when you're doing like a big project, is you can actually set bookmarks. So say you are working on something over here in this little corner. There's a couple hotkeys that you can memorize. And again, if you don't remember, you could always come back to the video. But this is very useful when you're building something huge. So if you actually hold down Control and just type any number. So this would be our first bookmark. So if I say Control 1, cool. So we should have that booked. So if we scrolled over here, right, and we're like, oh, I got to go back to that corner. If we just hit the number 1, boom, right there. So that's a pretty cool little feature. And I mean, you could bookmark a whole bunch of stuff. So like, let's say you wanted to, top down. So Control 2. So now we can navigate between the two. Just like that. Now, after you've got quite a few bookmarks, you might want to go ahead and clear them out. You're probably thinking, like, how the hell do you do that? Well, I'll show you. So you've got a few options here on your main screen. Now, we'll touch on these ones in a bit, but let's go ahead and let's actually go to bookmarks right here. So you can clear them all out just like that. And there you go. So now you've got a clean template. If you need to book different bookmarks, that's how you do it. But there's a lot of other things you can actually use in here, like showing the frames per second. You've got stats. You can obviously kind of go through them. Don't worry too much. I know it's pretty overwhelming when you see all this stuff. But let's go ahead and take off the frames per second. We don't really need that right now. You've also got the field of view. So if you wanted to, actually have a different look and feel, you can do that, but we don't want to do that either. Now, another thing too is, let's say you accidentally changed one of these values and you didn't know it was 90 originally. You can always just hit, there we go. You can go back and just set it back to default 90. Or, like I said, just kind of play around with it until you find that good fit. But yeah. And if you accidentally delete anything, and we'll cover this probably a few times throughout the series, but like I reversed the deleting of those bookmarks, and you could do that simply by holding Control and hitting Z. So now that we've played around with a few of these things, you've got other options in here that you can kind of play around with. Again, you don't have to memorize any of this stuff, but you can always play around with this stuff. Like, so perspective is always going to be your main layout. So what we're seeing right out the gate, this is what you would refer to as a perspective. Now, lit is also what you would actually see in game. You could also change it to different types of, lighting. You can check out the collision, all kinds of stuff. But like I said, we won't focus too much on that. That's more in-depth type stuff. So another thing too that you might encounter throughout your placement of, I don't know, like items and things into the actual game. Sometimes you might have misclicked something and then it's just, you can't find it, but you know it's there. Double check this show, because this is actually going to go ahead and label out what you can actually see in the editor. So like, for instance, if we were to take away, let's go ahead and choose static meshes. Boom. Well, you can see there's now nothing on the screen because this whole scene is practically static mesh. So if you ever see things disappear, just double check show. Some things are unchecked by default, and that's fine. So, on the topic of static mesh, this whole scene is built using pieces. And what a static mesh is it's essentially just a like, I guess the best way to explain it is it's just a shape that you can use to create things like a wall, flooring, different, I guess interactive things in here. Um, but yeah, it just really gives the game, I guess, depth. But we'll talk more about that later. Now we've covered these. Now over here, we've got a few other tools. So first things first, we've got your object selector. And here's another thing too. Like if you're ever curious about what the heck to select, just hover over it. You'll get a little tooltip. And it can kind of explain what the heck you're looking at. So rotation, like let's click this guy for a second here. You can also see there is hotkeys for that. Like for instance, rotation is E, scaling is R, and we'll show you what each one do. Now, before we do that though, let's take a look at this. So you've got this arrow thing, and we'll explain what this is. So this arrow system is telling you where this particular static mesh is going to go ahead and snap. So if you wanted to move it to the right, you can go ahead and drag that guy, but you can't move it up or down. So this is just one way or the other. Now you've got this is going to raise it up and down, and then this one's up and this way. So if we just hold Control Z, let's snap that back to where it was. So that's just like moving stuff around. I know it's kind of weird, but it's easy to get used to. So then let's go ahead and click that mesh again. Now this is the rotation. You can kind of see it's similar but different. So if you just hold on it, you can rotate it. Let's reverse that, and you can see it's got different points that it's rotating, and cool. So that's rotation, and then scaling. This one's pretty interesting. Similar layout, that goes up, that goes down, left, right, and up, down. So Control Z will reverse that. So you'll notice too, like when you're moving stuff around, you've got like this weird snapping, which can get a little annoying, especially when you're using modular base building with different assets. You can actually go ahead and disable snapping by clicking that. And again, you could enable it, or if you really want to fine tune it, you can actually choose the different snap size. So play around with it, you'll see what I'm talking about. Same thing kind of goes for rotation snapping. So when you're rotating an object, you can disable the snapping and just have free range, or you can fine tune it. Same thing applies for resizing. Now camera speed is another thing too. So you can see with a small level like this, 4 is great. Camera speed 4 is amazing. But let's say you had a massive level that you needed to like scale out of. If you increase that, you're going to be able to accommodate that. So you're not going to spend 5 minutes trying to zoom out. That's also another way, bookmarking comes in handy as well. But if you didn't have a bookmark and you needed to get there quick, just change that and you'll be good to go. So yeah, so that's some basic navigation. Next, what we'll do is we'll actually play around inside of this level here. And then I think we will look at a few other things, but let's go ahead and play around in the level. So when you're ready to kind of actually go into what you're actually looking at and want to play the template that you've elected for the level, you can just click this green little play button, and that's going to go ahead and throw you into the game. So controls would be the way you would control the game. So WASD. And since we did choose that third person template, we're going to have a fully rigged character with controls, physics, everything you need to. And that's freaking awesome, because like if you actually look into setting that up from scratch, it's got a lot of work in it. So it's just good to have that foundation, because you're going to be able to build off of it. So yeah, just run around, have a look. Looks really cool. And you could stop by hitting exit, or you can even hit the stop button there. And yeah, so that will actually go into the game, so you can kind of play around with it, test things out. You know, especially when you start implementing things, you want to check collision on things and try to troubleshoot and fix things up if they're not working correctly. And that's a great way of doing it. Now, looking at the actual interface of Unreal 5, you'll notice that there is a lot of changes, especially for the ones that did come over from Unreal 4. And one of the major ones is the content drawer is not there, which is cool because it gives us a bigger perspective of the actual level we're working on. But you're probably thinking like, well, how do I load that up? Well, there's a couple ways. So the first way is by holding control and hitting spacebar. You can load it up that way, or you can click that. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with this is actually going to be the navigation, kind of like how you find files through Windows, but this is going to go ahead and help with organization. So it's all broken down into different folders. Now you can actually see these folders as well going into your file explorer, but never move stuff around in the actual file explorer through Windows. Do everything through Unreal. It will just save you a lot of errors and things like that. So yeah, definitely don't move stuff around. That's including adding stuff like dragging and dropping. There are import options to choose, but we'll talk about that later. But if you go through, you can actually see you've got a lot of different stuff you can kind of click through. I mean, by going in, you can kind of play around, click stuff. It's not going to break anything if you open it. Just don't delete anything and you'll be fine. Now, as mentioned, you know, like if you had something that you wanted to import, right? There's this import button. Now it's going to load up your Windows file explorer. Just find whatever it is you need. And that's how you import. But there's another cool feature, but we're going to talk about that in the actual level design video, which is probably going to come up next, actually, with Quixel Bridge. And that's just all streamlined. So, yep, that's cool. Then you got your maps. Great, cool. So let's collapse all that. And we could just go ahead and put it back to where it was. All right, cool. So, I mean, this one's definitely a lot shorter than the last video, which is cool because, again, we're going to keep things very simple for the time being. But before we go, we've got this area. I just want to go ahead and kind of explain what this is. All right, so everything you see here in this scene, you can find here on the side. This is going to be your outliner. And if you click stuff, you can see each little thing is its own thing in the actual scene. So you can see it's all labeled as SM underscore, ramp 2. Now when you look at projects, you're going to actually see a lot of names are going to be abbreviated. And what this means is static mesh underscore whatever it is, right? So again, the static mesh is that object that is either going to be, something in the level, maybe a wall, floor, building, whatever. But you don't need to memorize that stuff. It's just, something to keep in mind. Like you'll see a lot of stuff like BP underscore light, and that's a blueprint. But we'll kind of go over that stuff as we go through it. But I think we can leave that for now, because what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and actually get into the level design. And we're going to start talking about these other features, because it's going to start incorporating these other options that we didn't really touch on, like the landscape, mesh painting, things like that, Quixel Bridge, and some other stuff. Now, one thing of note is if you don't have Quixel Bridge, just make sure to go into Epic Launcher, go into your Unreal project, and what you're going to want to do is just click plugins, which are just different plugin resources that you can actually add into the game. For instance, let's go ahead and take a quick look. Plugins. There's a lot of different ones. Now, a couple I recommend just adding is the landmass resource. So we'll toggle that one. Yes. And we'll also add the water one because that's going to come in handy later on down the track. Now, these ones are currently in experimental, and then this one's in beta. Now, before anything's really finalized, just make sure to hit restart, and that's going to go ahead and reboot the project and make sure that those plugins are actually functioning within the game itself. And we'll talk about what those tools do later. The main one is landmass. Actually, I'll tell you what it does now. So you can actually go back. Landmass. Okay. Well, whoopsies. Yep. Okay. So what the landmass is it's actually a brush that we're going to be able to use to help manipulate the ground and things like that to give stuff like different depth of field. That way everything, it doesn't just look flat, because like this isn't using a landmass. This is completely built off of static mesh. But with the level we're going to create, we're going to go ahead and we're not even ever going to use this level again. So yeah, I guess we'll leave it at that, and I guess we can go ahead and get into the real meat and potatoes. So we'll keep this one short. So I do want to thank you guys for popping in and just getting an idea of how to navigate. If you found anything useful, maybe something you didn't know, definitely let me know in the comments. If there was something you want me to clarify, leave that in the comments as well. And if you can also be so courteous to hit that like button, I'd appreciate it. Help, bring some of this education across the board. Because as you can see, I'm pretty brand new into this whole YouTube thing. So look forward to seeing you guys on the next tutorial. Peace.